So the main part of the lesson, or the first part perhaps, is about how McDonald's expands into India. If you were in my BBI class, you'll recall this. It's a good refresher because McDonald's is a very good example of the multi-domestic strategy, as in they slightly modify all of their product to suit the culture where they are operating. So it could be something as simple as extended hours in Middle Eastern countries to encourage people to break their fast during Ramadan. It could be a special product, um, and in India it was actually several changes. So, it's an example of the multi domestic strategy, meaning you modify what you are doing for the location that you're operating. The other part is the transnational strategy, which is kind of, same product everywhere around the world. For the very, very most recognizable blue chip brands, it works great, but most choose to have some small changes. So they actually researched for years before they entered the market. So they didn't just, it's not like, for example, you might remember the Target failure in Canada. They kind of bought some stores, opened things up before everything had been in place. McDonald's did it the other way around. They researched all the little details, and when they opened in '96, it was ready. And here's kind of an example of what a McDonald's would look like in India. So I know this is a cultural lesson, but there was a logistics component to this as well, and that's keeping food fresh. And there's because of the warmer temperatures, the facilities are not at the same level as they are in North America. There's some food spoilage in India, and McDonald's didn't want that to happen. It costs money, people could get sick, it could hurt the brand reputation. So they really planned their logistics, their supply chain. This when people are talking, say they work in supply chain management, they're talking about getting the product there on time, fresh, in the best state possible. So they tried to find local sources for all of their ingredients. It couldn't come from one part of India to the other. The roads were not in the best shape, so local sources for everything. And they also had cold chain management. The food was cold in the warehouse, in the truck, in the restaurant. It never got to room temperature, and that prevent food spoilage. And they also checked periodically, randomly to make sure that the food had not gone bad. And so spending 81 million may have saved hundreds of millions later on. And here's kind of the cold chain management. You can see people are wearing their parkas and toques in the warehouse because it's the same temperature like as a freezer. And the product never, cold chain management means for food, the product never warms up. So, they just, again, some of the logistics. So, fries. Uh, One of my uh, favorite anecdotes about the history of McDonald's was how even in the different parts of the US, the humidity was different, so the fries behaved differently, and they made kind of a special potato storage container that would allow the air to circulate around the potatoes and kind of get everything, potatoes in California, the Midwest, the Southwest, the Southeast, all kind of have the same humidity, and the fries would be consistent. So, Indian potatoes are very moist, and this soaks up oil, and the fries were not golden brown, they were lumpy and brown. So, they had to improve the local potatoes. They uh, went over there to study the conditions. They transported special saplings to that region, and they found the region in India that had the lowest precipitation, and had their farmers irrigate it just like a US farmer would, and they got more potatoes and more fries that were like the US version, and here is a pile of them. So, the idea of McDonald's is very big on having drive-throughs, and this seems simple, drive through. But culturally, it's actually been an issue. In China, when they first opened there, people would go through the drive through, order their food, park their car in the restaurant parking lot, and enter the restaurant and eat what they had ordered in the drive through. So, well, it's not as intuitive as it seems. And so with people, not enough space in cities, a lot of motorcycles, bikes, no room for drive-through, so they went for home delivery. The roads can be hard to navigate. They might not be in the best condition. So again, they set up their food supply chain before they open. Target might not have set up their supply chain before they opened in Canada. McDonald's had their supply chain in order. And again, they found the local established firms who had a history of being reliable and chose to partner with them. And they, instead of drive-through, they had these kind of scooters where kind of the food would stay hot, on the back of the scooter. So the pricing, it's seen as cheap food in Canada, in the US, but it's an expensive food in India. So they made it more of a family special occasion. Go there once a week for family dinner. And then once people started to go, they encouraged them to go more often. They got people in the door by having a special occasion and then made it an everyday experience. And Happy Meals, for whatever reason, were especially popular among all ages. So they really pushed that and made Happy Meals one of the brand identification elements that stood out in India. Again, and here's you see some of the menu items, a little different than what you would see in North America. So one of the main issues, beef is not consumed in India, so they had to adapt the recipes. The Big Mac was replaced with the Maharaja Mac. The mayonnaise had no eggs. The oil was only vegetable oil, and they had new items like Makaloo Tiki. If we go back to the menu board, probably in the U.S., if you saw a fish, at McDonald's, might not even be on the first or second page of the menu board, but here it's featured prominently, and you can see there's a lot of different chicken dishes out there. So now, 25 years later, they operate 350 restaurants and they have 325 million customers in India. It's been a great success. They're trying to double the number of stores they have in the south and west. And again, culture. So first they had to get people used to going to McDonald's. Then they got to get people used to going there every day. Now they're trying to get people used to going to McDonald's for the McCafe, for the coffee. And they are really pushing their McCafes. They did this about 10 years ago in North America. Now as coffee and teas are becoming more popular with the younger crowd in India, they're doing the same. So part of the modifying their strategy, they have to keep adapting as tastes change. So back to the course content, and here's our Maharaja Mac. You can kind of see a closer look. Something a lot different from what they would serve at McDonald's, but it's like a Big Mac in North America. It is their signature item. So just some terms, just to hammer a couple of terms home. So they talk about culture, kind of our beliefs, our values, how we interact with each other, how we dress, what is customary. And there's a couple of terms, and I know this because I wrote the exam. Be aware that a subculture and a cultural group within a larger culture, that has a slight difference, slight modifications. Like in Canada, there are many subcultures that have some of the Canadian traits, but they also retain their own culture. If you were to look at it like a Venn diagram, so a subculture, for example, you would notice if you went to a supermarket on Bathurst Street, there's going to be a bigger a kosher section to for the large Jewish community in that area who eats kosher. That's the kind of marketing adjustment you would make. Just something. Like you might see. Like when in the 90s, when sporting goods shops started stocking more skateboarding shoes and apparel, because those sort of routines and rituals became a little more mainstream, so they help represent that subculture in their store. Counterculture, something that might be in opposition to the current accepted culture. You might see this in certain areas, like Kensington Market or Queen West. I know they have been gentrified a little uh, um, lately, but the idea that the people who don't feel that they're represented by big chains, who want to make more of their individual statements, they might, choose a more, smaller location. Or, for a food example, like, um, the sweet potato in the Junction is really, really for people who don't feel like a Loblaws or Metro, makes the quality of food that they want to have. They're kind of a little bit oppositional to that everyone else. So, it can be profitable to be that niche market, that deals with that counterculture group. And just a reminder, factors that create culture would be our geography, where are we located in the world? Because obviously the US and Canada are very close in culture because we are next to each other. Now, it's not to say that it's exactly the same or even that the culture in one state is the same as another state, but, due to the proximity, there is going to be, certain common factors. Climate, that's what we grow, what we eat, how we dress, are we going to be active and outdoors? Are we going to be maybe like in Australia because of the climate? Or are we going to be a little bit more indoors and individualized? Religion, that obviously those customs influence our culture and also our history. So again, we have links in Canada to France, to the United Kingdom, to Ireland because of the immigration that occurred in the late 19th century. We also have links to say Italy and Portuguese for some of the mid 20th century immigration, and then later towards Asia and other parts of the world after Trudeau opened up immigration in the 1960s. So again, where people are coming from is a part of that. What we've lived through. Again, these are all factors. So if it's asking you what the 4 factors that contribute to culture are, that would be geography, climate, religion, and history. It also, mentions a little bit about business culture. So I think what would pass at North Toronto would not necessarily pass in every business office. And, what works at one office isn't going to work at another. A smaller office might be much more relaxed. A company that's just starting out isn't going to have the same rules and procedures. Something downtown on Bay Street is going to have a certain degree of formality that you might not see if you walk into, if you walked into the Blake's law firm. This is one of their offices, very, very corporate and official. There's a big reception desk. All the meeting spaces are well defined. They're very, very rich tones. You would see people, wearing a suit and tie, shaking hands, be very, very, very professional. If you were to walk into a law firm in York region, as a sole proprietor, that might not have that kind of level of formality. You might see, a different environment, and, business culture is going to be different than regular culture. If you've done co-op, you've had a summer job, you might be seeing that. And also what works in one company, there's a video for Google in our lesson, and you can see they have a results-oriented work environment. Results-oriented work environment, ROWE, meaning if you get it done, it doesn't matter what time you come in, doesn't matter what you're wearing, doesn't matter if you take breaks. So here's a Google workspace, and you can see there's some video games, there's some colors, people are mixed together, it's very informal. You'll see people taking breaks. They let people work on their side projects. At Blake's, you better be billing what you're working on. Whereas at Google, you can take that afternoon a month, that day a month to work on a side product, and they've created some, new innovations as a result of that. So, understand, when we say business culture, it's not going to be one size fit all. And I think even just these 2 photos just show the difference. And it's, as you learn when you go through Unit 3, adapting to the company, to the country, to the culture where you're working is a very important part of success. And I stay safe and stay active, and I'll see you next week.